Welcome to the Mid-Week Tease with me, Adelle Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, we're diving into this not having parents thing. So I have no parents. My dad died when I was 18, my mom when I was 23. And I remember when it hit me a few years after mom died that, I didn't have parents. It was more like relief that this happened when I was in my early to mid 20s. I was basically done with uni. I think I had like a semester or so left when my mom died. I had a job. I was already on radio. I was pretty stable in terms of like material or financial things, right? And so because I was so focused on the provider role that parents play and the fact that I didn't need that, I completely overlooked other needs that come up in adulthood that can only be met by parents. Like, I remember during my wedding, at the end of the party, end of the festivities, and my uncles and aunts were leaving. It was such a trigger. I wept so hard that one of my uncles, who hardly shows any emotion, was the one holding me. I feel like I completely traumatized the poor guy. But I think in that moment, the feeling I'd had the whole day undercover, or like it was like an underlying feeling of my mom and dad not being there in that moment, which is not how I envisioned getting married. All of those feelings just hit me, And that's just one example. There are very many moments in adulthood where you get reminded that you have no parents. It happens in challenging times. It happens in good times. I always feel regrets that I'll never be able to fly my mom out for a vacation or to buy her a car or build her a house. Not because I can't necessarily afford it. Obviously, the building of a house would take me some time. But because she's not here, that's why I can't do these things for her that I would have loved to be able to do. I feel like she died too early. I didn't get a chance to spoil her. These feelings hit me even when I hit career goals, and milestones. Like right now, I'm filming my first ever film, directing it for the first time being a director. And this was my first ever movie script, right? And I know in like 2 of the sets, I felt that feeling of like, man, if my mom was alive, she would have come to the set, and just experienced and celebrated this moment with me, like a mother would. You know what I mean? Like healthy mom would. I could only imagine just how happy she would be. And it feels like I have these moments in my career or just in life where I'm just so happy about certain things. I just don't have parents to share that moment with. And I'm not downplaying the people around me who I can share the moments with, who I do share the moments with, who I can celebrate the highs and like cry in their hands during the lows. I'm so grateful for them. But in the same breath, like these 2 things can be true. There's a different level of that connection when it's parent-child. It can't be replicated. It just cannot, Obviously, losing your parents as a child is terrible in ways I probably can't even fathom. But same, being an adult with no parents is hectic. And I often, as if you've listened to our flagship podcast, when I'm navigating something, I will do a deep dive and I will read all the articles. And I came across an article called Things You Only Know If You're an Adult Orphan. And it's by Emily Dean. And she lost her parents and her sister in the space of 3 years. Like her entire family wiped out. And she was talking about just like the moments that had to change and the moments she really felt their absence. One of them being Christmas, and she talks about spending her Christmas with her brother-in-law or with her best friend's family and just adapting to the new sounds. She writes about it very beautifully, like the new sounds of different people laughing, etc., which is not what she was used to before. And that's something I'm always anxious about, Christmas, let me tell you. I do have my sisters, which is something to be very grateful for. They both have kids and in-laws, etc. So there's a side of me that acknowledges that they have to create their own family traditions. Like, I don't even feel bad about that. It's just life, you know? I also acknowledge that I have to do the same, even though I'm child-free. This past Christmas, I spent it with my special person and their parents, which was different. It was great. And I laughed so much. Like, it was wonderful. Like, I'm even just remembering all this. And we all had to, like, make a dish. And it was pretty fun. And, you know, it was just fulfilling. Actually, fun is not the word. It was fulfilling. And when I got home, I was basking in that feeling of like, wow, this is, you know, such a yummy Christmas. And then I started to feel guilty for enjoying a new Christmas experience without my mom, especially because obviously I spent more Christmases with her than my dad. But yeah, I started to feel guilty of like, why are you enjoying this thing? Grief is something else. And then after the grief, I also got a bit jealous that he has his parents, both of them. What? I had none. Not even my dad, with whom I had a very strained relationship with. But these moments of not having parents in adulthood that I'm like, even that strained relationship, I'll take it, bring it back. I'll work on it. But these are just like very real emotions that come with not having parents in adulthood. And the reason I'm being very honest with you about these emotions is because I think it's okay for me to feel them, you know? It's human for me to feel the guilt of enjoying myself and also to feel a bit jealous of people who have both their parents, you know? Now, Emily ends her article by saying, like I'm reading word for word, so it turns out not all orphans need a wealthy male benefactor to swoop in and save them. The unconditional love of a loyal little dog might do it. The support of a family you build yourself with an army of loving friends. And without throwing shade at the world's most famous orphan, it's about obsessing less about the whole tomorrow business. Today is the one to shout about. And I really feel like I'm at that point. First, I'm constantly telling myself, Adele, be where your feet are. Stop like obsessing about tomorrow. Be where your feet are. And for like the last 3 years, I've gotten to know who I truly am. What do I love doing? What makes me happy? And even learned how to enjoy my own company, you know, and how to put together my circle, you know, the people I feel safest around. And honestly, you don't need that many people for that. I think for me, it's like 3 people. And that's absolutely something for me to be grateful for, you know. In the moments where I feel down about not having parents, I allow myself to feel that emotion because bottling it in is not wise. I've learned this the hard way. But once I'm on the other side, having processed and felt that emotion, I then remind myself to be grateful for the people I have who I feel safest to be myself around. That's also something to be grateful for. But as I said, I kept deep diving and there's something I came across called orphan syndrome. And it happens when you lose both your parents, either through death or maybe for some reason they're emotionally detached from your life, etc. And it affects both children and adults. And basically, this syndrome is like a subset of grief, but it's unique to people who've lost both their parents, children and adults. And it has various symptoms attached to it. So a fear of being abandoned, you get anxiety or panic when a friend or family member leaves for a period of time. You have a deep fear of being alone. You have low self-esteem. Those are, I'm not saying you have them. I'm saying we have on this list of symptoms those 4 things. And I also found that there's some feelings that come with becoming an orphan in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. All right. And sometimes it can bring up old buried feelings of grief. So if there's like an element of grief that you didn't, like past grief that you didn't process, if there's grief that you thought was way behind you. So maybe you lost the first parent, and then after a few years, you lost the second parent. When you're grieving your second parent, the grief of the first parent can come back. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, so I don't know, it's like compounded grief. It just like resurrects all the other grief, which is just irritating, you know? Other feelings are, it can make you feel very lonely. And when I was reading about this, it was constantly emphasized that this is very normal. Like, having no parents changes the familial status, right? And so it can be quite isolating within the family, but also within like social settings, let's say friends, etc., because your friends will be like running around doing certain things for their parents, and you'll just keep being reminded you don't have parents, and that can be very isolating and can lead to you feeling very lonely. And so some things that I found when you know, people were writing various articles about how to cope with the loss of both your parents. One thing that stood out was your grief matters. It's very valid. And so you have to create the space to allow yourself to feel it. I think, well, what I used to do with uncomfortable feelings is I would rush past them, right? And like, just be like, nope, 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 nope. Let's not first focus on that, which is why even like, let's say in my mid-20s, when it hit me, hang on, I don't have parents, I quickly rushed through those feelings and was like, well, at least it didn't happen when I was a kid, to kind of not sit with that grief. But your grief matters. It's very valid. So make time to feel it. I also found this list that added find ways to connect to your parents and to celebrate their lives. This one is like so scary because I have an ancestral altar that doesn't only have my mom and dad, it has my uncle, it has something from my grandfather. And there was points where I was just like, is this me going mad? Like, is this me refusing to let go, etc.? But the more I settled into my routine and my spiritual practices, I kind of understood this is just a way of me continuing to celebrate them. And that's okay. I'm not doing it from I wish one day they come get me. No, it's from wow, I came from this lineage of wonderful people. I want to remember them and celebrate their lives, you know? And so whatever that looks like for you, do it, but always keep it in check, because sometimes grief can be so overwhelming, you can convince yourself that they're not dead, they're coming back. And so you wouldn't want however you choose to celebrate them to be part of that. You know what I mean? It could also be like, you know, making their favorite meal. Like my mom used to make the most amazing rosemary chicken. I do not cook, and like I'm not going to attempt to make rosemary chicken to celebrate her, but I have planted rosemary around the back of my house, like where my flower garden is. I have the hugest rosemary bushes. Like I just saw them tonight. They're so big. And that's my way of honoring this thing that reminds me of her, you know? There was also the element of finding a community that understands what you're going through. This one is difficult, I have to say, because everybody's grief is so different. I don't think I have a community necessarily that understands my type of grief, but I have first the community I talked about, like the 3 people who just allow me to break down around them. And then I do have friends who have lost a parent, not both. And sometimes when we have conversations, I learn something. I had a conversation with one recently. Shout out to you, Marcus. And yeah, I just learned something about grief that helped me feel hopeful about my personal journey with grieving my mom, but also grieving my dad, who I had a strained relationship with, you know? So I may not have a community per se, but I have people who are really close to me, and those conversations that I have with them teach me things and like make me feel so much stronger. And then the other thing I found was how important it is to just be kind to yourself, you know? So take some time to move your body physically. I've recently gotten into walking, and I've set like 5,000 steps is like my daily target. So I do a morning walk, and then I turn off my Fitz app, and it's just the things it does for my mind is wonderful. Just like moving my body. I come back drenched in sweat, and I live in such a cold area, drenched in sweat, because we have these hills that are difficult. It's like a hike, by the way. It's a hike. I love listening to music and dancing. Oh, I serenade myself with, is it serenades? Romance. I romance myself with candle-lit baths. In fact, I'm going to take one right now because I know I have such a long, full day ahead of me tomorrow. So tonight, I'll light my candles that are right by my bathtub instead of taking a quick shower. And then I'll put on, so I normally put on whatever show it is I'm currently watching. So like now I'm rewatching Monk. And then, just kind of soak. And I just do this thing for myself because why not? I'm not going to wait for somebody to romance me. I'm a romance myself. But yeah, be kind to yourself and compassionate, because it's like very difficult. And don't downplay the emotions that come with acknowledging that you are an orphaned adult. I think that's the term they use, because before the word orphan only used to apply to kids. But now, the more we see that it does affect you in your adulthood, there's different terminologies for these things. But yeah, it comes with a lot of emotions. So be kind and be gentle with yourself. In the show notes, I've put a link to Emily's article in case you want to read it. And yeah, I'll catch you right here on Friday. We have a brand new podcast that's launching this Friday. I've not made the announcement anywhere else. You're the first one to hear it. And I think you're really going to love it. So, yeah, you and I will be hanging out again on Friday. Thanks for listening to the Mid-Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.